Welcome to DevOps Accents, a podcast on everything around DevOps, public cloud, and cloud-native topics, with your hosts, Pablo, Leo, and Kirill.
Hello and welcome to another episode of our podcast, DevOps Accents, where we got together today as a big group once again with Kirill and Pablo, including our head of data and AI, Paul Larsen. Hi guys, thank you for coming.
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
Hey.
Hi. Once again, I remind you that we are mkdev, where we provide DevOps services, cloud consultancy, AI, and data engineering services. And here on DevOps Accent, we discuss everything around cloud technology, industry, and everything that happens in our area of interest. We invite different guests from different domains to see their perspective and understand where we should move in the next months, weeks, and how to prepare to what's coming. And the main reason why we decided to make this conversation with Paul once again is to discuss news in AI area, especially when it comes to regulations, laws, and things like that. And last time, when you were a guest here, were with us, we've been discussing ML ops practices with you, Paul. And now you are a head of data and AI at mkdev. Things has changed, right? How do you feel, Paul, about that?
Yeah, these are exciting times, I think. And I don't just mean the pace of innovation in AI. And I think there's a lot of question, hey, just because these models seem to be performing better on certain tests than other ones, is this really moving things forward in AI? But rather because it's what you can do for your business that's changing. And here we do see a lot of what we mentioned in our blog post about scaling AI across your business. We have a bigger part of the working population, big companies, small companies, in responsible ways that are able to test out little AI projects by using these new GenAI, this large language model. So there's a lot of potential for innovation that I think wasn't as strong. It was there last time we talked. I mean, ChatGPT wasn't new. And what makes it, I think, also exciting is now Europe has its first set of laws around how companies are using AI in the EU's AI Act, which went into force starting in February, and then more measures will go into place over time. And that for me, before I went into data science and AI, I worked in risk management with Deutsche Bank and Allianz. So for me personally, it's a great time together with mkdev to be building up and to be in this area of not just, hey, how do you build stuff and make it work for the business, but then thinking about also what does this mean? What are the constraints? Which I think if you're a responsible person, you're doing this already, but now it's an official part of our job to make sure that we're doing it in responsible ways, that we're thinking about the real world impacts of these things, and also a lot of just best practices that people should just be doing. So it's a pretty cool time.
Right. By way of advertising, I want to mention that you, Paul, recently been working with Association of Cybersecurity Experts, where you were holding your course and lecture for them, helping other companies to get into artificial intelligence. This is something that we now do at mkdev, and I also will put a link in the description on the webinar that Paul holds, explaining how to start AI initiatives in your business, where to start, how to proceed, things to remember, and the most important things. This is really interesting time we live on right now, and the way how AI Act was implemented, it didn't just stroll into law, right? It's printed because, as I remember correctly, its first proposal was in April 2021, and it's already got into force this year. and it will go in full enforcement in August 2026. But anyway, comparing to the GDPR's, I don't know, leisurely more than 6-year jog, and the way how they quickly implemented this, I think this is kind of saying, right, that the EU and the world have some concerns and ideas about that we need this area to be regulated. What do you guys think about this, like in general?
I don't know. I think it's good that European Union did something faster than before. But only thing is that they did introduce new regulation faster than they introduced previous, like IT data-related regulation.
I think there's some key differences too. So, and actually, it would have happened even faster, but with the kind of viral spread of large language models starting at the end of 2022, the first draft of this regulation, which I had already been teaching a bit about in some workshops that I ran, they added this whole new section about these general purpose AI models. So it would have been even faster if they hadn't said, "Oh, hey, we have to respond and include large language models, GenAI, and certain specific risks for them." Maybe one other reason why I think you could expect, or you wouldn't expect it to take as long. It's not about data used in any business process, which is GDPR. So GDPR has a wider scope. It's about, of course, some data processing, but specifically AI systems. And as we've seen, it's getting, this innovation, these really innovative things. And there's always, I think that's one of the things that we're trying to offer is de-risking this innovation, because there's always a funnel that you start a bunch of projects and you're not sure. Of course, you can be better at it, and then you have a wider funnel. What starts as an experiment, a proof of concept, what goes into production. But there's always a drop off. And there, I think one of the key differences also between GDPR and the AI Act is that, with a few exceptions, the AI Act requirements only apply to AI systems that are actually being used in the market. So the R&D stage, okay, if you're at a university, in any case, but even at businesses in the R&D phase, your requirements are quite minimal. In fact, almost nothing, with a few caveats. Whereas GDPR, anytime you have customer data, it doesn't matter how you're using it, that's personally identifiable. So it's a bigger scope, I think it's fair to say.
Something that the people can see on the street is that Europe is very good doing regulation. But for example, in this case, it's not so good doing AI. They try to regulate something that is made by the Americans or the Chinese. So while they are not creating that, so this is one of the main problematic themes that the people can see, because at the end, I don't know, it's like if you don't make cars and you regulate how you need to drive these cars when you're not creating cars.
Yeah, but here I think it's really this. Okay, what you're saying, of course, a lot of these kind of deep learning models and these things, which are phenomenal at computer vision and definitely with natural language processing. But this was also one of the outcomes of our blog post, where I interviewed some data AI team leads at Outbrain, at Allianz, at ThoughtWorks. Still, a lot of the use cases aren't large language models. A lot of it is using things that were developed in universities. Okay, maybe some in the United States, but they're not. It's not that you're doing everything on AWS models or on Anthropic or on OpenAI. So if you look at, certainly, Pablo, what you said is true for now, although Mistral is quite good. I've kind of switched over to Le Chat. With that exception, with the GenAI and these large language models, yeah, that seems to be dominated. Even Satya Nadella now is starting to wonder, hey, what's the actual business value that we're generating from these things? I think it's important not to forget that a lot of the AI that's used in practice isn't the stuff that's coming out of 500 million to train a model, or only 5 million to train a model with DeepSeek.
On a side note, getting back to AI's timeline, that wasn't just about speed. I read a little bit about it. It was shaped by over 3,000 amendments and kind of intense pressure from tech giants. And this is where I kind of get opinionated, because to me, this smells more like a power play rather than safety concern. And I feel like Europe wants to be the world's AI referee, so to say, setting rules where others just scramble. And to me, this is kind of interesting, because I like this idea, right? Because before, when we think about the laws and the regulation that implemented by EU, it's like, oh, we need to regulate it because of safety. We have a lot of concerns, and we need to protect people. We need to protect environment. We need to protect anything else. But this time, I more feel like, okay, this is the real goal is not safety, but like a global dominance. And I like this idea because for once we did something good and right.
Yeah. So I don't think, I mean, some people do, and Europe gets a bad rap for dominating in terms of regulation, right? In this case, yeah, okay, it's not my call. It's been put into law. But say you just had Sam Altman approaching the Trump administration saying, "Hey, could you help us out? Wink, wink. We have hundreds of different state level AI legislation. So the California AI legislation is what I'm most familiar with. Um, hey, we can't satisfy 50 different, how many things at once. Help us out, please." Right. And this is actually so two things to say. This is the first thing. This is supposed to be one of the benefits of the EU single market, is that yes, there's regulation. Yes, for some people, and we should talk about this more, especially small businesses, startups. What does this mean compared to big tech, like you mentioned? But the one of the arguments, and we'll see how it works out in practice, for having this European-wide regulation is so it's not, if Mistral wants to have its services in Bulgaria, does it have to deal with the Bulgarian regulators, right? There should be a single framework so that these services, and by the way, it's not just these big providers. It's also a bunch of companies using AI, that they're allowed to use AI, deploy it to their customers without having to negotiate with all of the different markets where they're active in Europe. I think the second thing to point out, you were saying about dominance and health and safety. So if what you said is correct, Leo, then the AI Act is a total failure, because the whole point of it is to take this risk-centered approach and to focus on where AI systems pose a risk to health, safety, and fundamental rights, and otherwise leave people to basically innovate without constraints. And what I've seen, there are a couple of examples that you could say, I don't know, but really it's these high risk areas. Okay, there's prohibited AI, no subliminal messages, no deep fakes, don't do massive surveillance on everybody unless you have a good legal justifiable right. But these are no brainers. Come on. This is why I like living in Europe, that they have one of many reasons that I don't have to worry about this movie like surveillance and real time things that you do have in other countries, unless it's targeted. So there's prohibited and then high risk, and these are actually supposed to be explicitly what you're saying, Dale. Only if it's about a fundamental right. Hey, can I get a loan to start up a business? Am I going to be discriminated against for access to finance? Am I going to be denied access to a university because some AI system just glitched, right? Is my medical treatment health and safety, right? So I think it's fair. I think for me, one of the biggest questions is why regulate AI based on what the EU has decided, which overall I think is quite sensible. Okay, we see how it's going to be implemented as things really come into force, but why regulate AI, and why not just regulate the places it's used? Like medical devices are regulated, cars are regulated.
Yeah, that was also I was wondering, like many of parts of this AI Act are kind of, they forbid using AI to do something that is already forbidden in the first place. Like fake reviews, for example. Like it's already forbidden to create fake reviews, and now it's forbidden to use AI to create fake reviews. But why specify the tool that you use to violate existing law? Why not just update existing laws to find different places where AI could be used and say, okay, also it's bad with AI. And then areas where that's completely new, like I don't know, university applications, for example, and then regulate this part where there was like no precedent before for violating something.
I mean, one difference, I don't know how substantial, is that, and the laws, the Europe-wide laws about fake reviews, I'm not so. I did look into, when I was preparing for this cybersecurity module, that I looked into lie detectors. I'd never looked into lie detectors before, but they're actually forbidden. This is an example. They're forbidden, with the exception of 2 countries across Europe, and for some quite good reasons, statistically speaking. But that's also something that's already forbidden. One thing is, this I'm not sure about, but about this fake, if you're a European company that's enabling people in other countries to create fake reviews on Amazon. I don't know if this was already, you're providing it as a service, but you're not doing it within Europe. So I don't think, I think there's the appearance of this risk, Kirill, there. I think you're absolutely right. And for me, it's this question of, if it's already regulated, their practices, and I have my own thoughts about it, but just before we, why have extra regulation in how it's done, which is, what you were saying, Kirill.
And about the, say, stifling innovation, because there are, like you mentioned in the article, there are 3 exceptions, right, where it's okay to use AI, and you don't need to look at AI Act. It's like natural persons, so I can use AI for my personal use cases because I'm not a company. I can just do whatever with ChatGPT. And then the second case was research institutions. So there is like no one actually tries to regulate places where something new is being created, like in universities and some scientific funds, which I think is good. Like this, that's the place where you probably should not regulate, because you should first create something without being afraid that you get this 35 million plus fine. But the third one for me was crazy because the defense is also exempt from AI.
Not just defense departments, but any company, private company working for a defense department. And this was, so Leo, you said, how did it go so quickly? This was one thing that slowed it down. There was a lot of arguments about, hey, does the European Union give defense use of AI total freedom? What about their subcontractors? I mean, companies like Helsing in Germany.
So basically, we still have our chance for the machine from Person of Interest TV show, like this tool that have this face recognition and pattern recognition on different people on the streets, depending on what they do, how they act, and it's recognizes them. And because AI Act strictly prohibits this like Big Brother stuff, right? So in spaces and social scoring and things like in public spaces, it strictly prohibits. But did they give for military and maybe for safety reasons an exception? Like, you guys can do this?
Yeah. So this is where this would be a fun thing. Actually, we talked about a blog post of explaining the AI Act through different TV shows and movies, and the Jason Bourne level surveillance of, hey, give me all the cameras. We're trying to find Jason Bourne. And so the exceptions you already mentioned, defense industry, whether you like it or not, is exempt from any of these restrictions. The law enforcement, immigration, these other things, it's treated the way like other law enforcement means are treated, is that you can't just blanketly do this. You don't just stop a person who's driving unless you have a reason to do it. So, I mean, or unless you're racially profiling, but you're not supposed to do that. That's the whole point, right? So for using this remote surveillance, there's some processes. I won't go into the details, but there's some legal steps that they have to follow. And there are also some hey, if it's some super urgent thing, you can go ahead and do it, but it has to be justified later. So there are some safety mechanisms, but you're absolutely right. This blanket Big Brother CCTVs packed every cell phone tied into AI to recognize faces. This is prohibited. Yeah.
But even it's prohibited, as you were telling, for the police, because this is defense.
No, but you have to have a reason. You can't just do blanket. You have to say, hey, this Pablo, he's too smart for all of us, and we're worried about his genius corrupting I don't know what, right? So if they had a reason to look for me or for you, then they don't do like everything, but they say, okay, he was last in this area, and then they can use.
Okay, but today nothing stops them to use all the millions of cameras that we have in Europe to connect to an application that is able to detect this guy that they are looking. So they can do that.
I'm not in this, so there are restrictions there which are similar to the existing non-AI versions, right?
Yeah, because police is not the military, right? So in this case, they don't fall.
Yeah, they make a distinction. The military they have no restrictions. Yeah.
But it's also like there are loopholes now because, for example, city of Munich could sign a contract with some private military company to put all the cameras. So technically, all the cameras belong to the military company, and all the AI stuff happens on inside military company. But then there's just a contract between Munich municipality and this military company that has all the cameras and face recognition.
Yeah, I don't know if this is. I mean, I get annoyed enough when I read about CIA operations on American soil, not in real life, like in novels and crime novels and movies, because the CIA isn't supposed to. I don't know. So these other separations, again, I think that's where we're back at this. Okay, if this stuff is allowed to feed military, yeah, this is not AI specific, right? This is, yeah.
Do you think your project infrastructure is well set and maintained? We know for sure there is always room for improvement. If you are uncertain where to begin, let's first do an audit of what you already have. We will review your setup from every angle: performance, cost, security, high availability, and automation, and provide you with a detailed roadmap of which direction your infrastructure should go, generate concrete tasks for you to implement, or even take on your infra entirely, if you let us, of course.
All right, guys. Before we move any further, I'd like to take the pause and explain to our listeners what we are actually discussing here. There are two main points for everyone to note, especially if you are a company or work in the company, that your company needs to remember that there are two things that are taking that are in force right now that you need to remember. There are risk levels and AI literacy. So risk levels, that the thing that we are discussing right now, basically there are three risk levels. It's like a dystopian sorting hat, like prohibited, high risk, and minimal risk. So prohibited is basically everything Big Brother stuff. It was acted outright. Think of public surveillance, things like that. Face recognition, blanket face recognition in public spaces. High-risk systems is Paul will give a better description than that. It's like healthcare diagnosis, hiring algorithm, things like that. And minimal risk, chatbots, and you just need basically just put a label, yes, I am a bot, and that's it, and you're good. And another thing, okay, Paul, you can give a better description just of what I just said.
No, I was going to say I think the way we did it in our blog post is that you have this what risk category, which is about the inherent risk or not so risky, about what the AI system is doing or part of what it's doing, exactly like you said. And the high risk should only be if there's some genuine risk to health, safety, or fundamental rights for us in Europe. But then you have these two how risks, and the one you already mentioned, right? And that's a new one that affects anybody. If you're producing content, using AI that somebody could think. It doesn't mean you're tricking them. It doesn't mean you're just doing it efficiently. We've written about how we do this, right? That we last year for our customer, I created documentation, technical documentation, right? If you write any things that it's going to be like a gluten label that you have to, hey, this product contains gluten. This text was produced with some machine input, right? There's going to be some labeling. This is part of this transparency how risk. And then sort of the fourth type of, third category is what we mentioned was added on, which is this general purpose models. And here the idea is that you have significant supply chain and systemic risk. So the big difference between, and this, people talked before 2021 about transfer learning, which is saying, hey, let's take a computer vision model that's good at classifying. Okay, I'll give you an example that we did at Allianz too. It's good at just classifying pictures of trees. Yeah, you just put on your hearts, Pablo. Trees, and it's good at classifying coffee mugs. Or if you know this Silicon Valley pizza, no pizza. Do you know that?
Yeah.
You take a model that can do that, and then you take a little bit of extra data. So for us at Allianz, we were trying to predict damage after natural catastrophe events to businesses. I mean, not predict, detect it. It had already happened. And you don't have to start from scratch. You can just take a few thousand extra examples and transfer this knowledge. And this was amazing, right? To say, hey, you don't have to start from scratch. With these large language models, especially really starting with GPT-3, you have one single model that with just a little bit of tweaking can do so many different things. So the idea is that now if something goes horribly wrong with one of these models, if somebody implants some self-destruct sequence deep in that's only activated. Sorry, I just watched no, not Winter Soldier. What is it? Civil War, Marvel Civil War, right? If you have Bucky, if somebody says the secret Russian words to activate Bucky, so he goes crazy. If this sum gets implanted in one of these Gemini or Anthropic or Claude, and then everybody, somebody triggers this, there's a supply chain risk. Okay, it's not going to be, almost certainly, I don't think it's more likely going to be boring but still impactful things that are just failure modes that people hadn't thought about. And if this is spread across, the huge IT supply chain, every chatbot that is based off of a Claude, a Gemini, a GPT-4, a Mistral, whatever, then that's considered a systemic risk. Yeah. So those are kind of the risk types.
Yeah, and I think the most interesting part for those who listens to us and for many companies who are producing high-tech technologies right now is a high-risk systems. And the most difficult part for them is to understand whether they are a high-risk system or a minimal risk. Because if you are a high-risk system, you get slammed with compliance. You have to make risk assessments,
You have to register exactly.
Yeah, human oversight and mandatory EU database check-ins. This is kind of complicated and difficult because, for example, we've been talking to the guys on the other podcast episode, previous episode, we've been discussing e-commerce recommendation system. And they take into account products, different products, and it can go as far as recommending someone something based on their purchasing patterns or what that and things like that. And I've been thinking about this dream idea for online shopping when you stand in front of your camera, in front of your laptop, and you trying different clothes on yourself. And is it a high risk system? Because it has to scan my body type. It has to understand who am I, my gender, how I look, how tall am I, and apply the clothes depending on how I look, how I stand. And people were discussing this ideas right now on the conferences and the new ways of online shopping, but at the same time, how hard for them it will be to implement these tools given the new regulations.
Yeah. My best guess now is that this would not be high risk. And the reasons are the following. One, they make explicit exceptions for, so you're talking about biometric, they call it biometric identification, biometric, taking the way your facial recognition, whatever, even supposedly ears are a really good way, but that's maybe from watching Person of Interest. I don't know if that's really true. But yeah, then they know what you look like, they know your gender, they know all this stuff. So first, GDPR will certainly be relevant because the service doing this will be probably storing, or maybe not, maybe but you're consenting to a service that is doing precisely this biometric thing. So this is fundamentally different than I just go for a walk. I go out with my wife and somebody has these cameras and they know what club we went into to go to a jazz concert, and they can track us and whatever. So that's the one aspect. And the other thing that's mentioned is, what about facial recognition on your phone? Yeah, this is explicitly excluded because the idea is that, hey, this is part of the service that you've signed up for. You know that you're doing this. It's not, I want to get a bank loan. Do they want to know what my gym membership is? Not intrusive things for something that's not explicitly part of the service that you as a customer are trying to do. So, this case, it's really, I think what we're going to see, and this is the challenge, I think that for companies to be ready, but not overreact. So the government, the nation level bodies that will be really implementing this, they have until this August to get set up. So if you really want to take chances, you can get away with, which I wouldn't recommend, but you could say, hey, they're not even going to be active until August. And this high risk legislation doesn't go into effect until February. What I think we all know, not just from AI, but from IT, if you know you're going to have to make some big changes, if you wait till the last minute, it's going to be more buggy. It's going to be 10 times as expensive. You're going to have people. Yeah. So I think taking a pragmatic approach, you have an inventory, like these e-commerce companies, they have a position ready. They say, hey, I don't think it's high risk. These are my reasons, right? Then you wait. And when I worked with regulators before, they're reasonable people. Yeah, they're tough, but they want to work with the businesses. So the worst thing you can do, so I heard this from, I forget her name. She was one of the top risk people at Deutsche Bank that presented at a town hall. It's not the crime, it's the cover up. The worst thing you can do is say, oh, I didn't know there was an AI Act. Oh, really? There's regulated. Oh, I had no, come on, if you're in this business, it's your responsibility. So it's best effort. I think the main thing is to show that, hey, you're trying to do the right thing as a company. To start with, if you have some reasons, then just go with it that you think, hey, this isn't high risk.
Is there a way for a company, like a simple, a simple answer, how they can understand whether they are a high risk or a minimal risk, or whether they should take actions? Or is it a tricky one and they should talk to people like us to make the inventory assessments? Because, for example, they might be thinking that they have minimal risk implementation or something like that. And then if you go deeper inside the algorithm, then we might discover that there is some kind of algorithm that take into consideration some specifics that may be like 10% of your business, of your product, but they can be marked as a high risk and you don't even know that. Is it possible?
Yeah, so I think there are two things that businesses should really be concerned about. One is missing stuff, like you're saying. And there, I think you can do this also it's amazing what a difference it makes if you actually read through the regulation and not just reading. Even I try to really go into detail in my blog post, but that's also not enough just to read what people think the regulation means. So I think if it's a big company, look, they already have legal compliance at Allianz. There's this whole AI governance team that we work with. If you're a smaller company, it's a question, do you want to? Here, I think just going with a law firm is not a bad idea, but I think not enough unless you have a law firm that has people that have been working in AI for years, because there are these gray areas. What is even this definition of an AI system mean in practice, and how would you interpret that? And here I really think, okay, this is, I think, my pitch for us as mkdev to support companies, that the EU Commission, they turned to AI experts when they came up with this regulation. You as a business, I think you should also have somebody that's really worked in AI helping you along the way, and not just somebody that's come to it, not just a lawyer, not just somebody that worked in data and has read the regulation, but really understands it. And it's actually now I'm up to 3 things, but I'm still on the first one of why you should this expertise. It's not just recognizing, hey, is this high risk? Is this minimal risk? Is this prohibited? Then assuming that you have some remediation practices, assume that you realize, oh, you know what? We haven't checked if we're discriminating against women or against people. Then you have to change your implementation. And then you need to either explain to your tech team, but they missed it in the first place. So that's where I think having people that like what we offer at mkdev, that don't just understand the regulation, but hey, what does this mean on the technical level? What are the things when you're developing your AI that you need to bake in? You just have to be doing this from the beginning, right? Otherwise, it's going to be, like we said before, huge costs, delays. If you have to add this stuff at the end when you realize, oh, whoops, this is high risk AI, we're going to get in trouble, up to these huge fines, 5% of global turnover. But there are other things that you can just add on later if you do stuff well. Actually, this is something Kirill and I worked with a bit with setting up certain integration with services. If you write your code doing some basic things, but then not everybody's doing, then you can add on like this logging and monitoring and some of these other requirements. As long as you set up your code, you do some important, maybe not so basic things to start with. Then if it turns out, oh yeah, we are high risk, then some of these things you can just add on later. And then you're saving yourself money. You're only doing this if you have to. Things like data quality, really understanding what's the data you're coming from. This you have to bake in from the beginning. And if you're not doing this already, this is going to be expensive. And especially if you just bolt on some data quality afterwards, then you're going to have all this friction because you just added some extra layers on top rather than baking this in of the whole way your data team works. So that's the one. And let me be really quick with this final thing. There's also the risk of overreaction. I've seen this with GDPR. I've seen this also with some free AI Act implementation. You have people that are afraid of this 5%, 7%, 30 million global turnover. And they say, every single project has to have this from day one, right? And you start having companies, because of this fear factor, if you're not dealing with, you don't have at least one person in the company or they bring in from the outside that really knows this in and out, then you have the big risk of overreaction. And then you're really killing your innovation.
Yeah. Especially when it comes to high risk, because if you are a high risk, it doesn't mean you shouldn't do that. You still can do that, and you still I'd say must do that for innovation sake. But just be aware of and do the risk assessment and things like that. And another thing for the companies to be aware of, and we also mentioned that in the article that Paul mentioned. I will put this in the description for everyone to read. There is a AI literacy push. Basically, this is education for companies, developers, and the public to, I'd say, demystify AI's black box. And this literacy isn't optional. It's funded mandate. with training programs and campaigns to ensure we all know when artificial intelligence is pulling strings, like, for example, when rejecting our loan or profiling our face. We need to be aware of that. Companies need to be aware of that, and those who work at their companies need to be aware when if they are using AI and if they are being affected by artificial intelligence. Can you tell us a little bit more here and what we need to do?
Yeah, so this is one of the shortest bits. It's really just one paragraph in the AI Act, but it's also, along with this prohibited AI, the second measure that's already in law. It's already in effect from this past February. And the statement is that for the people that are engaging with AI in your business, so the people that are deploying it, let's say if it's a credit credit scoring, some loan officer that are dealing with these things, is that the companies have to ensure an appropriate level of AI literacy. And this needs to respect the actual AI system that's being used, the expertise and the background of the person who's using it, who's being affected by it. So I think what's interesting about this is that it's not that it's specific to the AI that you're using. So I think a lot of us have either been to these trainings. Hey, you have this brain logo with a bunch of wires about it on the title slide. Hey, AI is changing the world. This you have to understand. This is how. So it's just watching YouTube videos and generically understanding kind of what is artificial intelligence is actually not enough to satisfy this requirement. And I think that's potentially a good thing because so this is some work research I'm doing with a computer science professor at University of Ljubljana. What does it mean to have end users really understand and be able to explain what these AI systems are doing? And this is the way that people are going about this by the typical trainings where you learn about, hey, what's machine learning? What's this, training different data set preparation? What are these different terms? Unsupervised learning, supervised, reinforcement, whatever. My take is that you don't necessarily have to know any of that if you're going to satisfy this literacy requirement, because really it's about the users being able to recognize when their systems fail, right? It's the end users being understand, hey, what are the failure modes? What can go wrong? So for example, if it's automatic loan granting, that's one thing. If it's a customer service chatbot, that's different. And yeah, there's some similarities, but going into lectures about you have to understand this kind of mathematics is actually, it's not included in this literacy. It's not required. And I think it's actually counterproductive. So it's really focused on the AI system that you're doing. Let's say if it's some fraud detection, which by the way is automatically minimal risk, some fraud detection, then you don't have to understand all of machine learning for beginners. It's really, okay, what is it that you're dealing with? What are the failure modes? What can go wrong? What are the false alarms you might get? How do you respond to it? So YouTube videos aren't enough, but it has to be targeted, right? And also to make it usable for the users and not just people like us that have this technical background. The second thing is that you should see this as an opportunity. So I think, especially with these large language models, actually some of us aren't, but we all should be aware that most people use these in ineffective ways. Either you're too gullible, you just believe whatever it spits out, or you're not structuring your interactions in such a way that's going to get you the best results. And here, I think a statistic, it's from a platform company that monitors its customers' code development. So all the code commits, everything that it's writing, and it finds that people that are using these coding AI tools, the greatest benefit is by the experienced people because they're good at how to do it. There's also benefit from the very beginners, but also these beginners' code quality is going down. So they're really, I think this literacy requirement, you have to know what AI you have, because otherwise you can't fulfill it. I mean, it has to be specific to how your company is using AI. But then you can look at it as an opportunity to make sure, maybe take away some of the fear that some of your employees have about using AI. You could increase adoption, but also have more effective use of your AI tooling and better risk management. So there are a lot of, there's some, it's a broad requirement, but there are a lot of benefits that companies can have if they do it well.
Just one question. So do I understand correctly that in terms of this AI literacy training, it's not going to be like with GDPR training, right? Because the situation with GDPR training at companies that there is some enterprise survey training tool that probably costs lots of money, but essentially it's basically 25 questions, just like with the multi-choice questions that people need to go through. Because with AI literacy, it's possible to build something like this, right? It needs to be, as you say, like product specific, feature specific. So if it's a finance company with like fraud detection, it needs to be focused on this particular area.
So I'm sure that there are people selling this, and I'm sure that there are big companies, because this won't be cheap, that will buy this. My reading of it is that unless it's really specific, I mean, one thing you could do is you have people like mkdev help you design a learning path, right? Okay, you have this AI inventory, but unless you have someone internally designing this learning path, but even if you do that, I think the chances are super high that A, these platforms are expensive, and B, it's going to be doing some, people feel good about the training if they're not really annoyed because they'd rather get back to their actual deliverables, but it wouldn't be meeting the spirit of the requirement, literacy requirement, which is use the AI that you're interacting with, responsible for, in a more effective way and with lower risk. So I think there will be platforms, I think for small to medium companies, at least to start with, unless these platforms get really good and really cheap, it's better to bring in somebody that can do this in a really targeted, efficient way, can quickly kind of go through how you're using AI. And we're doing this we'll write some more blog posts for those of you about how we're doing this mkdev soon. But quickly go through, hey, this is what you're doing. Let's just do these 3 user groups. We'll do these 3 1-hour trainings with some extra interactive exercises. You document it, and then maybe you update it if something changes or you have new joiners. But it can be done. There are no specific requirements about the form it has to take.
If you put it in a simple word, I think this is kind of similar to safety instructions and safety briefings. For example, on construction site, where you have to wear your hard hat, don't put your fingers into a power outlet, things like that. On many places, it's a mandatory. They must do that because the job is affected by life risks and injury risk and things like that. But then we have similar things in offices where employer must conduct these, for example, fire safety briefings for their employees, and employees need to understand how to escape the building in case of the fire.
So we could have AI drills instead of fire drills, right?
Yeah. For example, at least people need to understand that, and this is an interesting part. We need your people need to understand in the office that, for example, whenever you are using ChatGPT, you are using AI, right? Or things like that. Even if you are using, even now, if I open simple Google Docs, there is a window on the right with suggestions based on artificial intelligence. It analyzes things like that, and people need to be aware of that. And this is what this AI literacy is all about.
Yeah. So I think the difference. Okay, the construction industry has been around for, well, if you think back to building with stones and house and wood for millennia. But I think one of the differences, and we hadn't talked about this yet, but why regulate AI systems and not just the products where it's incorporated? And for me, one of the reasons it's also to your point, and that we have 300 to 350,000 years of experience with human failure modes, right? That's approximately how long Homo sapiens have been on the earth. We have 10, possibly 20, if you include like spam filters and some other early years of experience with AI failure modes. So I think with this safety, actually my sister-in-law, she works at one of these companies that does these fire safety trainings. I think the level of standardization, it'll probably come. But at least in my view, if you start trying to start with, I think you want to have something that is really fit for purpose, lightweight, but really to the point for this AI that your company is doing, which is possibly similar to other companies, but just clicking it off a menu, I think is not going to be enough. It's not going to be effective to start with. I'm sure we'll get there, right? This stuff is evolving.
It's part of our evolution, like or a cultural evolution, where and this is kind of how human learned to recognize patterns. Human will quickly learn, and it's already happening. Quickly learn to recognize AI written text. There are these tiny differences in how the text is structured, how well the grammar is, and things like that. And based on that, you already can recognize, okay, this was AI. This was written by AI. And this is the way how we evolve.
Yeah, or you think you do, but these AI, hey, this student used AI to write their term paper. This is notoriously bad, right? And I think this is the key thing, especially with AI literacy, is to watch for certain biases. And I mean this in sense of heuristics, like little shortcuts that we take, not just, of course, discrimination too, but more in the sense of, that we anthropomorphize. We tend to think that they operate the same way. And there are a lot of examples that we have, serious ones that, and this is, I think, the main purpose and what I tried to get across a lot in this training with the Cybersecurity Association. These failure modes are different. And this is where there's certain ways we can relate it to other stuff we know, but this is different from humans. Like 2019, some Chinese white hat security researchers, they found that Tesla Autopilot could be convinced to swerve into the oncoming traffic if you put the right decals along the road separation. Humans don't do that. I mean, we know our human failure modes. So we know if you're drunk, you're going to get in an accident. If you're too tired, we know these things. With the computers, autonomous vision, we're still learning, and we're not as familiar. So another risk that you have that's emerging is, so again, with cybersecurity, that there's malicious software all over the place, right? And one of the ways to get people to download malicious software is in one of these, say, repositories, libraries like PyPy for Python, or a Node package manager. You introduce them the name that is like one letter off. So you hope that somebody will try to install it, and they'll be off by one letter. They'll spell it a bit wrong, and they install your malware instead. So some researchers have.
So it's a malware for dyslexic people, no?
Yeah, it's counting on that. But this is the new twist, which is even worse. That because these AI code assistants will generate code for you, and they make up packages that don't exist, right? So this is a new attack vector. These malicious actors, they generate a bunch of code. They see what are the most likely to be hallucinated Python packages, Java packages, types, whatever, and they register their own malware under these names, right? So these sorts of things we're used to the normal failure modes, and even IT, as hard as it is, and now you put AI on top of it. And I think there needs to be the awareness that just because ChatGPT answers kind of like a human, it's still not. And I mean, not to get into philosophical debates, but to get it to work in the right way, you need to be able to think a bit critically and have this literacy to be a critical and more effective and safer user of this technology.
This is new, a lot of new things, even for us, people who on a daily basis we work with high technology. And this is new even for us. When we speak about people who are not as literate in terms of informational technology, this is even more important, and this is all what this AI literacy is all about. But when it comes to action, what actions the companies should do, whether they should be concerned about, especially when it comes to bigger companies like enterprises, large corporations, and smaller companies, what the main action they have to take.
So I think to get started, actually now, if you haven't already. So big companies, Generali, Allianz, they've been preparing for this for years. But if you're a smaller company, or if you're a bigger company that was kind of asleep at the wheel, that wasn't following this, get started now. And like I said, it's not the crime, it's the cover up, right? So really start doing best effort, even before you can do an effective AI literacy program. You have to know what systems you're actually using, right? So this means either internally or with a company like mkdev to come in and have an AI inventory. What are these that are likely to be high risk? What are the ones that, oh yeah, we're pretty sure this is minimal? Because look, we're at the end of Q1 2025. Projects, especially if you're a smaller company, you can be a bit faster probably, but if you're a medium to bigger company, you'll need budget to fix problems. If you identify gaps, oh, wait a minute, we don't have the right data integrity measures. We're not testing our predictions. We're not logging our predictions correctly. We're not doing all these other technical things that are required for AI systems. And if you want to avoid rush and high costs at the end to make sure you're compliant before these things go into effect, you should start now. And then you prioritize, right? You have either internally or with mkdev or some other company. Okay, let's start with this one. Let's get this one going, and then figure out how we can really even more efficiently than for the next AI system that's high risk, make sure it's compliant.
All right. I think we've covered on a high level everything new and everything important that needs to be taken into consideration right now by you guys. Those who listens to us. I will make sure to put the links in the description. So follow them, read, and think about whether your company, whether your action are compliant with the new regulations. If not, or if you are not sure, just hit us a message or in the comments or from the website. Give us a call. We will be able to discuss this and help you figuring out and sorting your AI inventory and what you're doing with that and how you should proceed in the short terms and especially in long terms when more regulation will take in force. Thank you, Paul, for sharing all the details. And I think we will have more opportunities and more occasions to discuss more as more will become and more will be discovered. Thanks, guys. Thank Pablo Kirill for joining me today, and those who listens to us. Thanks for coming. We will hear you in 2 weeks. Make sure to be subscribed for new episodes. And the best way to not miss anything is to be subscribed to our mkdev Dispatch newsletter, where we share everything new that happens at mkdev. Anyway, thanks for coming. Thanks for listening. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
The cloud tech industry is evolving so fast. Do you keep up with it by improving your skills or upskilling your team? At mkdev, we offer a variety of workshops for just that, from the basics to expert knowledge. Before delivering our workshops and training sessions, we carry out a detailed assessment of each participant. To make sure the workshop is helpful for you and your team, we will add more content to it or throw out what you already know. Or we create a custom workshop specifically for the needs of your team and the specifics of your project.